There's a secret god more powerful than God and the devil combined. A god that's so blasphemous that for centuries just whispering about it could get you branded as a heretic and hunted down. But even though the church tried to hide its existence, this secret god has influenced everything from religion, secret societies, magic rituals, even modern psychology and pop music like Lady Gaga's Abracadabra. Now, as we uncover the truth of this hidden god, you're going to uncover closely guarded secrets about reality and a completely new understanding of yourself and the world around you. In fact, understanding this secret god is key to unlocking your power. But I'll warn you, this is extremely controversial. So is there really a power higher than the God of the Bible and Satan, a force that holds the power of both heaven and hell? Let's begin our discovery of the hidden god called Abraxas. So who or what is Abraxas? To find out, we got to take a trip back to the 2nd century CE, straight into the mystical, shadowy world of early Gnosticism. See, Gnosticism, it was a radical, underground, spiritual revolution that seriously pissed off the church. So what was it? Well, the word gnosis means knowledge, but it wasn't just any kind of knowledge. We're talking about secret, hidden wisdom, the kind that could set you free or get you burned at the stake. See, the Gnostics believed that the world wasn't what it seemed at all. They claimed that reality itself was a trap, a kind of spiritual prison designed to keep humanity ignorant of what we really are. And who's the warden of this prison? The God of the Bible. Yeah, to the Gnostics, the creator of this world, the God of Genesis, he was actually a lesser, imperfect being, a false god called the Demiurge, or the Chief Archon. And instead of worshiping this jealous, tantrum-throwing sky daddy, the Gnostics wanted to escape his illusion completely and return to the true divine self, the limitless reality of light beyond this material nightmare. That's where secret knowledge, gnosis, comes in. See, they believed that by awakening to hidden truths, you could free yourself from the grip of this reality. Now, to be clear, it's important to realize that not all Gnostics believed the same thing. Gnosticism, it wasn't some unified religion with one set of doctrines. It was more like a secret underground network of different schools, each with their own take on reality, the divine, and how to escape the material world. For example, some believed the biblical God was just ignorant, while others saw him as downright evil. And that's where Basilides enters the picture, because he had his own secret teachings. Now, Basilides wasn't your average preacher. He was the kind of guy who started secret societies because his teachings were so controversial they could get you hunted down. Seriously, did you know that some of the first Christians actually had secret societies because their teachings were considered too dangerous? Yeah, and Basilides, he was one of them. And the stuff he was teaching, it would have made your pastor's blood run cold. So in one of these secret gatherings, Basilides drops an absolute bomb. The creator god? Yeah, he's not actually the real god, not even close. Instead, Basilides claimed that the God of Genesis, the one everyone was worshipping, was just some lower being, an archon, basically a middle manager of the universe who made the earth but wasn't the supreme power. Instead, Basilides had a name for the real supreme being, Abraxas. Now, here's where it gets wild, because Basilides wasn't just saying Abraxas was your average god with a beard sitting in the sky on a cloud, throwing lightning bolts like a grumpy Zeus knockoff. No, Abraxas was the source of all things, the power above all, the first principle of existence. So really imagine living in a time where everyone's afraid of the biblical God, and here's Basilides standing up like, actually, there's something more powerful, and guess what? I know its secret name. Now, we don't actually have any of Basilides' original writings because, shocker, they all conveniently disappeared. Translation, his enemies made sure they got destroyed. So what we do know comes from the early church heresy hunters, guys like Irenaeus, Tertullian, and Hippolytus, who really didn't like him. And so relying on them to understand Basilides is like getting your info on the Jedi Order from Emperor Palpatine. It's going to come with an agenda. But according to these church fathers, Basilides laid down a whole cosmic hierarchy, a chain reaction of divine beings emanating one after another like some kind of celestial family tree. And at the very top was the unbegotten Father, the ultimate unknowable source, and from him came divine forces like mind, word, understanding, wisdom, power. You get the idea. This process supposedly continued for 365 levels. Yeah, that's right. So 365 heavens, one for each day of the year. And guess who's in charge of all 365 heavens? In his book, Adversus Hereses, or Against Heresies, Irenaeus writes that the Basilidians believed that their chief is Abraxas, and for this reason, he contains within himself 365 numbers. So Abraxas is the boss of the 365 heavens. But what about the God of the Bible? The church father Tertullian wrote a book called Against All Heresies. I guess he had to one-up Irenaeus by putting the word all in there. Anyway, in this book, Tertullian writes, "The heretic Basilides affirms that there is a supreme deity by name Abraxas. Now among the last of the angels, those who made this world, he placed the God of the Jews, the last, whom he denies to be a god, but affirms to be an angel." So according to Tertullian, Basilides taught that Abraxas was the supreme god, and the God of the Bible wasn't even a god, he was just a low-ranking angel in charge of the physical world. Starting to see why the church fathers weren't such a big fan of good old Basilides. Now here's where it gets even more insane. The name Abraxas itself is a secret code. Let me explain. Remember that Irenaeus said that Abraxas contains within himself 365 numbers? What does that mean? Well, see, in ancient Greek, each letter has a numerical value. And so if you add up the numbers in the Greek equivalent to ABRAXAS, guess what you get? 365. One for every single day of the year. And that wasn't just a random number. It symbolized the 365 heavens. Abraxas rules over all of them. The 365 days of the years, implying he governs time itself, and the 365 parts of the human body. But wait, there's more. Abraxas has exactly 7 letters, which corresponds to the 7 days of the week and the classical planets, the sun, the moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. So this guy wasn't just ruling the heavens, he was in charge of the planets too. Abraxas had dominion over the entire celestial order, from the heavens to the planets, years, days, even the human body. So according to church fathers like Irenaeus and Tertullian and the rest of the early church's grumpy old men club, Basilides revealed a whole model of the universe with Abraxas at the top, who emanated smaller spiritual beings in sequence. And lurking at the bottom of this heap of angels governing the lowest realm, our world, was the God of the Bible, the creator described in Genesis. In other words, the God worshipped in the Hebrew Bible was, in Basilides' system, just one of the lower angels, not the ultimate God at all. Some sources even say that the Basilidians believed Christ was sent by Abraxas. Tertullian writes, "Christ, he affirms to have been sent, not by the maker of this world, but by the above-named Abraxas." This was heretical with a capital H. To the Orthodox believers, Basilides might as well have detonated a theological bomb. If you were a devout Christian in 150 CE and heard someone say your beloved God was just a low-level angel and that some weirdly named deity was above him, you'd be pretty upset. The church fathers thought Basilides was off his rocker. Irenaeus even says the Basilidians practice magic and use images, incantations, and every other kind of curious art. Which, to be fair, sounds pretty cool. Like, if Irenaeus was trying to make them sound bad, maybe don't list everything that makes them sound metal as hell. Okay, so we have Abraxas described as the supreme deity, the source of all reality. But hold on, at the beginning of this video, didn't we say that Abraxas is a being of darkness too? God and Satan combined. Well, where did that come from? So to figure this out, we need to remember one crucial thing. Everything we know about Basilides' teachings comes from his enemies. So trying to understand Abraxas based on the church fathers' writings is like trying to learn about Dungeons and Dragons from those 1980s Christian pamphlets that said playing it would turn you into a Satanist. It's not exactly the most accurate source material if you're trying to figure out how the game works. So why is this important? Because the church fathers might have gotten it wrong. Let me explain. Most sources say that Basilides saw Abraxas as the supreme being, the source of not just the material world, but all existence, including the transcendent realm, the God above all gods. Sounds pretty great, right? But hold on, because Abraxas is also deeply connected to the physical world. He's linked to 365 days of the year, 365 parts of the body, the 7 planets, the 7 days of the week, all the numbers that scream space, time, and the physical realm. And the Gnostics, most of them saw the material world as a prison, a creation of a false god who keeps us trapped in an illusion. In fact, many Gnostic texts associate numbers linked to the material realm with evil entities called archons, rulers, or demons. For example, a Gnostic text called the Secret Book of John says, "This is the total number of the demons, 365. They work together to complete part by part the psychical and material body." So while most sources say that Basilides saw Abraxas as the supreme being, some people believe that the early church fathers like Irenaeus might have interpreted Abraxas as the ultimate divine being, when in reality he was a powerful archon, the ruler of the physical world, but not the true source of existence. In fact, in a book called The Refutation of All Heresies, they really weren't imaginative with their titles, were they? Anyways, in the Refutation of All Heresies, Hippolytus even calls Abraxas the Great Archon, and refers to the true source of all existence as the ineffable and unnameable one. So let's be real here, if the true source is unnameable, then it's certainly not called Abraxas. So was Abraxas really the supreme god, or was he a cosmic jailer running the material world like a spiritual warden? And it gets even more complicated, because not all Gnostics agreed on whether the Archons were completely evil. Some saw them as tyrants who enslaved humanity, while others believed they were just doing their job, keeping the material world running, no more no less. So maybe Abraxas was a good Archon, or maybe he was a bad Archon, or maybe, just maybe, the Church Fathers had absolutely no idea what they were talking about, and they were basically playing a divine game of telephone where the message got more garbled with every retelling. So if you're a little confused here, don't worry, you're not alone. So wouldn't it be great if we could get some info from the Gnostics themselves, instead of these asshole heretic hunters? Well, you're in luck, because here's where it gets even more interesting. See, for nearly 1800 years, our only information about Abraxas and the Gnostics came from the guys that hated them. But in 1945, a discovery in Egypt changed everything. The Nag Hammadi Library, which was a collection of actual Gnostic writings, was discovered. These texts were in the Gnostics' own words, and Abraxas actually appears in a couple places, and what they say about him is shocking. Look, back in the day, if you wanted to get in on Gnostic secrets, you had to join an underground secret society, risk getting burned at the stake. But lucky for you, today all you have to do is click the like and subscribe button. And you can also check out my books and downloads on inner transformation. Links are in the description of this video. So what do the actual Gnostic sources reveal about Abraxas? In one book called the Holy Book of the Great Invisible Spirit, also known as the Secret Gospel of the Egyptians, Abraxas is mentioned as a powerful being known as an eon dwelling in the realms of light. So in this account, Abraxas is an immensely powerful being far beyond the God of the Bible, but he still wasn't the source of reality, just one of its most powerful emanations. In other words, here Abraxas is a good guy, helping rescue humanity from the material world. Another Gnostic text that mentions Abraxas is the Apocalypse of Adam. Now, this text is a revelation Adam gives to his son Seth, where he reveals that the God of the Bible is actually an evil being trapping souls. I did a whole video on that, you should check it out. But at one point, Adam describes three immensely powerful beings of light who will descend to rescue people from the wrath of the biblical God. And guess who's among them? Abraxas. So during the destruction of the cities that were most likely Sodom and Gomorrah, this text says that Abraxas and Sablo and Gamaliel will descend and bring those people out of the fire and wrath. Okay, now there's a lot going on here. First, Abraxas? Who's Abraxas? Well, it turns out Abraxas wasn't originally called Abraxas. The real name? Abraxas. So somewhere along the way, there was a mistake, and over time, Abraxas got miscopied or mistranslated as Abraxas in various books. So most people today know this secret god as Abraxas, so that's what I'll be using throughout this video. But personally, I usually use Abraxas because, you know, accuracy. So just so you know, if you see Abraxas and Abraxas used interchangeably, that's why. They're the same being, same concept. Okay, so basically, first of all we had was information from the heretic hunters, who obviously make mistakes. They didn't even get the name consistent, and were the equivalent of trolls in the Facebook comment section. Most of them said that the Basilidian Gnostics believed Abraxas was the supreme being, the source of all reality, but that's not super clear, because in some cases, it seems like Abraxas might have been the chief ruler of the 365 Archons, and the heretic hunters maybe got confused. But then we get information from actual Gnostic texts themselves, and it describes Abraxas as a powerful being of light, far above the Archons, but not the source of existence. Well, what's going on here? Well, it might be that different Gnostic schools simply adopted the name Abraxas for different beings or concepts, kind of like how one religion's angel can be another's demon. So the Gnostics who wrote the Apocalypse of Adam and the Secret Gospel of the Egyptians, they probably weren't part of Basilidia's group. They might have borrowed the term Abraxas and given it their own spin. So we have this mix of definitions here. Abraxas is the supreme being, Abraxas is possibly an archon, and Abraxas as a divine eon of light. So is it any wonder that later readers would have been pretty confused about his true nature? But as we'll see, this blend of definitions is actually going to lead to something incredible. So in reality, Basilides probably distinguished between the unnameable true God as the source of existence and Abraxas as a powerful ruler but not evil. Likewise, the Sethian Gnostics saw Abraxas as an emanation of the true God. Either way, both sects likely viewed Abraxas as a good guy. But regardless of the details, to the church, Abraxas was evil. Basically, it was the whole, well, if you don't understand it, but it's not Christian, it must be the devil thing. Something I get a lot. Check out the comments, you'll see. So, Basilides' teachings were denounced as dangerous, heresy, and his followers, they kept a low profile and shared their knowledge, gnosis, in secret. It got to the point that by the medieval period and into the Renaissance, scholars who encountered Abraxas in ancient books just went, yeah, this must be some satanic nonsense. To the demon list it goes. But here's the thing. You can try to erase an idea, you can demonize it, you can burn the books, you can hunt down the believers, but somehow, some way, these forbidden concepts always find a way to come back into the world. And Abraxas, he thrived. Because while the official church did its best to stomp him out, his name slipped out into occult traditions, magic, secret societies, pop culture, and even psychology. And this is where it gets really interesting. So what happened to Abraxas after Basilides and his group disappeared? The name could have vanished, but it didn't. Instead, Abraxas went underground into the realm of magic and occultism, and the forbidden name took on a whole new life. While churchmen were busy denouncing it from their pulpits, occult practitioners were inscribing it on scrolls and carving it into gemstones, convinced that this word held incredible power. One of the most interesting artifacts we have are the so-called Abraxas stones, gemstones with the name Abraxas and strange imagery used as amulets or charms to ward off evil and for protection. Here's one example, a carved jasper gem from the 2nd to 3rd century CE depicting the strange form of Abraxas. You can see the figure has a rooster's head, a human torso in armor, and 2 snakes for legs holding a whip and shield. But hold on, we need to talk about this. Why does he look like that? The image of Abraxas has incredible secret meanings that we're going to uncover in just a minute. But first, yeah, that's a rooster head. Now, we'll get to why he has one, but I just want to be honest here, I don't like it. I personally don't imagine the great transcendent god of duality with a chicken face. The truth is, when it comes to symbols like this, what really matters is what resonates with you. If you picture Abraxas as a cosmic vortex of light and shadow, cool. If you imagine them as half god and half Satan, that works too. Even if you do like the rooster head, hey, no judgment. But anyway, Abraxas, the name condemned in churches as demonic heresy, was being used on the street as a spiritual shield. But even here, we have this strange blend of light and dark concepts, and it gets even weirder. See, on the back of this stone, there seems to be an engraving of the Gnostic demiurge, aka the evil creator, the god of the Bible. It has the head of a lion and the body of a serpent, and in the secret book of John, the false god of the Bible is described as having the form of a dragon with a lion's head and eyes flashing lightning bolts. So you can see the 7 rays from his head, which represent the 7 classical planets and days of the week. And here's another where he's surrounded by 12 animals. This is possibly referencing the 12 signs of the zodiac. So on one side of some of these amulets, you got Abraxas, and on the other, what seems to be the Gnostic version of the Old Testament god as a snake-dragon-lion hybrid. But that's not all. In the early centuries CE, the Roman world was filled with do-it-yourself spellbooks that mixed elements of Greek, Egyptian, Jewish, and Babylonian traditions. They were passing them around in secret like pirated PDFs, and Abraxas shows up in these texts as one of the secret names of power. Magicians would invoke Abraxas alongside other divine names in their incantations. So we see that some of these amulets pile on phrases like Iao, Abraxas, Adonai, mixing Hebrew and Gnostic divine names in one invocation. The idea was to cover all the bases by invoking the highest names they knew, and Abraxas, he made it onto that list alongside the Hebrew names of God. So throughout late antiquity and the Middle Ages, the name Abraxas kept a kind of shadowy presence. Later scholars encountering Abraxas in old magical texts tried to categorize it. Was it a god? A demon? An aspect of one god? Well, opinions varied. Medieval demonologists, which is a really cool job title, reimagined Abraxas as a demon lord. And here's another picture of Abraxas as a demon. Yeah, they keep making him look dumb. First, his followers give him a rooster head, and then these demonologists come around and declare him a full-blown demon and decide he should look like Something like a cross between Dobby and Smeagol. Anyway, do you see what's happening here? Abraxas, for some, it was essentially God, the highest of the high. For others, it was a demon to be feared, and for others, a mystical word of protection. The common thread here is power, a mysterious, ambiguous power that doesn't really fit neatly into one category. Abraxas, as an idea, always straddled the line between light and shadow. But now things get even weirder, because by the 20th century, he's showing up in secret societies, occult rituals, and even the teachings of the infamous magician Aleister Crowley himself. Let's get into it. By the early 20th century, Abraxas was a lot more than just a word whispered in shadowy alleys. It made its way into occult circles, secret societies, and eventually modern psychology. Now, most notably, there was the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. For those who don't know, the Golden Dawn was a mysterious secret society said to be guided by beings called the Secret Chiefs. If you want me to do a whole video about them, let me know. Now, the Golden Dawn borrowed from literally every spiritual tradition that they could find. Egyptian, Jewish Kabbalah, Christian mysticism, Greek magic, you name it. And guess what name made its way into one of their most powerful rituals? That's right, our friend Abraxas. Members of the Golden Dawn adapted a mysterious ritual that they called the Bornless One. Now, this ritual would later be modified by Aleister Crowley himself. And Crowley was a member of the Golden Dawn, the infamous magician who was called the wickedest man in the world. Now, Crowley was obsessed with discovering methods to achieve direct contact with an occult concept known as the Holy Guardian Angel, which is basically your higher self, our divine inner guide. So to make this contact, Crowley became obsessed with the Bornless ritual, which, you guessed it, features the invocation of Abraxas. Crowley viewed Abraxas as one of the sacred secret names of power, capable of granting the magician contact to their Holy Guardian Angel and ultimately control over spiritual realms, angels, demons, the whole crew. When performing the Bornless One ritual, the magician intones many powerful words, including Abraxas, aligning themselves with this cosmic authority. The occultist Israel Regardie called the Bornless ritual the most devastating and the most rewarding experience of the lifetime. So part of this ritual reads, "Hear me, Io, Abraxas, Sabriam, make all spirits subject unto me, so that every spirit of the firmament and of the ether, upon the earth and under the earth, on dry land and in the water, of whirling air and of rushing fire, and every spell and scourge of God may be obedient unto me." Pretty powerful stuff. After completing the Bornless ritual, the magician would have attained such divine power that they were to actually confront the four great rulers of hell, who would be commanded to submit to their will. In other words, by invoking the names of God, like Abraxas, and identifying as the Bornless One, the magician stands in a position to command even the chiefs of hell. Now, though Abraxas was just one of many names in this ritual, he was such a great fit because Abraxas is a being of paradox. Because of its different associations throughout history, it transcends good and evil, darkness and light, heaven and hell. Abraxas represented the ultimate spiritual alchemy, combining polar opposites, transcending duality, unifying the magician's human and divine natures. In fact, the symbolism of Abraxas is encapsulated in its strange imagery. A human torso representing humanity, serpent legs representing duality and wisdom, a whip and shield representing both defense and offense, and yes, a rooster head signifying the coming of the dawn, the awakening power of light and spiritual enlightenment. Now, you might have noticed that the image of Abraxas has the same themes as another occult god, Baphomet. Now, many people think that Baphomet represents Satan, but he doesn't. Just like the image of Abraxas, the symbolism of merging dualities together is everywhere. Baphomet is shown with the head of a goat, a primal and earthly animal often used to represent wildness, instinct, sexuality. But Baphomet also has human arms and torso, signifying human reason and intellect. Baphomet also has both male and female attributes, integrating masculine and feminine energies. And on its arms is the phrase solve et coagula, which is an alchemical phrase meaning to break down and recombine into a unified whole. And Baphomet points to the heavens and the earth, symbolizing as above, so below, or the unity of the spiritual and the the material. So no, Baphomet doesn't represent the devil. So who or what is Baphomet? Well, get this. Baphomet was worshipped by secret societies like the Knights Templar, and many people believe that the word Baphomet is actually a secret code that could reference a Gnostic eon of light called Sophia, or wisdom, who comes from the same realm as Abraxas. It gets pretty crazy, so if you want a whole video on Baphomet, tell me in the comments. So at this point, Abraxas is shaping into a powerful symbol for a being that transcends duality. And Abraxas, that theme of bridging dualities, is about to enter into the world of psychology. So, still in the early 20th century, the famous Swiss psychiatrist called Carl Jung found himself drawn to ancient Gnostic ideas as a way to make sense of all the chaos within. And guess which nearly forgotten Gnostic deity showed up in his inner explorations? That's right, Abraxas. He returned, like a ghost from the past, but this time in the language of psychology. So you know the terms introvert and extrovert? Yeah, Carl Jung came up with those. He was a psychologist who completely changed the way we think about the mind. He popularized the idea of archetypes, universal patterns that show up in stories, myths, and even our personalities. He also emphasized the importance of the unconscious, the deeper parts of our mind that shapes our thoughts and behaviors without us even realizing it. Oh, and one of his biggest ideas? The shadow self, the hidden, darker parts of us that we push away. And shadow work? That's the process of facing those parts, understanding them, and integrating them to become whole. Starting to sound familiar? In 1916, Jung wrote a mysterious book called The 7 Sermons to the Dead, but not as himself. Guess who? Basilides. Yeah, that Basilides, the ancient Gnostic teacher from the 2nd century, the guy who started all this Abraxas stuff. Jung didn't even put his own name as the author of the 7 Sermons to the Dead. Instead, he put Basilides. In other words, he treated this text as if it came through him, almost like a message from the unconscious or a mystical revelation. Jung later said that one evening his house felt full of spirits, the dead, who came seeking teaching. And in response, Jung wrote the 7 Sermons as if he was Basilides of Alexandria himself, who better to deliver secret wisdom than an ancient Gnostic master. And you know how we tend to think of God as all good and the devil as all evil? Well, Jung took that idea and completely flipped it on its head. And at the center of it all, Abraxas, a force beyond both God and the devil, beyond good and evil. Jung wrote, "This is a God whom ye know not. We name it Abraxas." Jung essentially resurrected Abraxas after nearly 1800 years, but not as some deity to worship, more like a symbol to contemplate, a way to expand our understanding of the human psyche. He describes Abraxas as a paradox, a god beyond gods. At one point, the text says, "Abraxas begetteth truth and lying, good and evil, light and darkness, in the same word and in the same act. Wherefore is Abraxas terrible. It is more indefinite still than God and devil." That says it all. Truth and falsehood, light and dark, all in one, all in Abraxas. Now that's why he's described as terrible. He breaks our nice, comfortable, clean, moral categories. If God is the ultimate good and the devil is the ultimate evil, then Abraxas is something much bigger, something that contains them both and goes even further. Jung describes God and the devil as two forces that emerge from an infinite balanced fullness, what he calls the pleroma. And above even these beings of God and the devil stands Abraxas, uniting together creation and destruction. In other words, what we think of as God and the devil are almost like two rivers flowing from the same source, that source being Abraxas. And Abraxas doesn't take sides. He's the energy behind all sides. He's both the God that gives life and the abyss that devours it. Jung said he is the sun and at the same time the eternally sucking gorge of the void. Jung knew how radical this was. That's why he only shared 7 Sermons to the Dead privately with close friends at first. But the idea behind it, it's actually a deep psychological truth. Life isn't all good or all evil. Every person carries both extremes inside them. By bringing Abraxas back into the conversation, Jung was pointing to a key insight, one that's relevant today. We can't ignore the dark parts of ourselves. See, Western culture has been obsessed with splitting the world into moral extremes. We worship an all-loving, all-good God and throw everything bad onto the devil. But Jung saw that as a huge problem because it leaves us blind to our own darkness. He famously introduced the concept of the shadow self, which is the the hidden chaotic parts of our psyche that we repress. The more we deny them, the more power they have, and in the worst ways. Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Jung's Abraxas is basically saying, face it, creation and destruction come from the same source. Or as the text puts it, what the God-Son speaks is life, what the devil speaks is death. But Abraxas speaks that hallowed and accursed word that is at once life and death. Abraxas isn't about choosing sides. He's the whole picture. The sacred, the profane, the light, the shadow, all contained in a single force. Jung saw this as the key to self-realization. The goal isn't just to be purely good by rejecting everything dark within us. The goal is to integrate the whole psyche, light and shadow, conscious and the unconscious, persona and hidden self. Abraxas is, in Jung's words, the God we had forgotten. Not some kind of like external deity, but a symbol of the totality of the self. Think about it. Most of us like to believe we're good people. We push our darker impulses away into the darkness of our unconscious, and we try to pretend that it's not there. But Jung would say, hey, don't fool yourself. That darkness is still in the house. You just locked it in the basement. And ignoring it, that gives it more power over you. Abraxas is a wake-up call that the highest truth isn't found in just clinging to the light and rejecting all darkness. It's recognizing the unity behind them. It's like the yin-yang symbol in Eastern philosophy. Each side contains a seed of the other, and both are part of a greater whole. And yeah, Jung was definitely aware of Eastern thought. He likely saw Abraxas as an analogy for the union of opposites, like yin and yang. It's kind of wild when you think about it. A once feared Gnostic heresy somehow became a tool for self-understanding thanks to Jung. And his message: to understand life, you have to accept that creation and destruction, angel and demon, saint and sinner, all come from the same source, and they're all in you. Jung always emphasized that we have to confront our shadow instead of projecting it onto others. And Abraxas, the god that unites God and devil, is a powerful mythological way of saying exactly that. But Jung wasn't trying to start some new religious cult around Abraxas. Instead, he was giving us a psychological tool, a way to understand ourselves better. And this idea about integrating light and shadow was about to spread beyond psychology and seep into pop culture in ways no one would have expected. So here's where things get really wild. See, the word abracadabra might not just be some random magic phrase. Some esoteric scholars believe it traces back to Abraxas. Now, Lady Gaga's Abracadabra video leans straight into the concept of merging light and dark. The song itself is an incantation. She chants the word abracadabra repeatedly, amplifying its power, just like an occult ritual. But the real magic is in the visuals. Throughout this video, we see constant symbols of duality, the black and white checkerboard patterns, representing the balance of opposites, the mirrored inverted A's in Lady Gaga, a direct nod to the law of as above, so below, the hermetic principle that says the unseen world, the spiritual, the unconscious directly shapes the physical, and then we have the black and white costumes of the dancers, and of course Gaga herself portraying both a light and dark version of herself. This is pure Abraxas energy, and I did a whole video on the occult symbolism in Gaga's video, so give it a watch. So the ultimate question is there really a power more powerful than God and the devil combined? After all our explorations, we can say yes, but it's not some super being ruling from the heavens, it's a principle. Abraxas isn't a literal deity, it's a symbol of totality beyond duality. Because of its various definitions throughout history, today Abraxas has come to represent the idea that reality isn't split into a cosmic good guy and a cosmic bad guy, they're actually just two halves of the same whole. The true higher power is wholeness itself, and that wholeness isn't out there, it's within us. Throughout history, Abraxas has been everything: a supreme deity, a cosmic villain, a magical word, an abstract symbol. It's almost as if Abraxas laughs at anyone who tries to label him as just one thing. The ultimate way to understand Abraxas is not as a literal deity or a demon, but a symbol for a state of consciousness. Think of Abraxas as the idea that true awakening or enlightenment involves integrating all aspects of ourselves and reality, light and dark, into a unified whole. When the Gnostics sought salvation, they wanted to awaken to the realm of light and leave darkness behind. But the Abraxas concept, especially in its modern form, it does away with this duality and presents a different kind of awakening, one where you awaken from the division of light and dark altogether. This means that light and dark, creation and destruction, are all facets of ourselves. And if that makes you uncomfortable, you're not alone. It's meant to be a little unsettling. That's why Abraxas is called terrible. It shatters the illusion that we can just pick one side and ignore the other. Now, hold up here, because embracing the darkness does not mean you should start being evil and acting like an asshole or going full supervillain mode. Not at all. Think of it like this. You can try to cling only to the light, to be perfectly kind, gentle, and selfless. But if you refuse to acknowledge that you have darker impulses, you'll just cast a bigger shadow behind you. The parts of yourself that you deny, they don't disappear, they just go underground, waiting for the right moment to explode. So take anger, for example. Society usually tells us, hey, anger is bad and we should suppress it, that good people don't feel it. But here's the truth. Anger is just energy. And like any energy, it can be destructive or constructive, depending on how you use it. If you repress it, it festers, turning into resentment, passive aggression, or even self-sabotage. But if you acknowledge it, understand it, and channel it with purpose, it can become power. Great leaders, artists, and revolutionaries didn't become who they were by suppressing their anger, they transformed it into action. Creators pour their frustration into art, athletes transmute it into strength. Even in personal life, standing up for yourself isn't about being consumed by rage, it's about using your fire in a way that serves you. So embracing Abraxas means to face and integrate your shadow instead of pretending it's not there. It's about recognizing that your fears, desires, angers, and ambitions aren't things to erase, but to understand and integrate. Or as Jung said in the 7 Sermons to the Dead, to resist it not is redemption. Jung called this shadow integration, the process of consciously acknowledging and making peace with the parts of yourself you were taught to reject. By integrating your shadow, you actually empower the good in you, because it's no longer being sabotaged by the parts of yourself that have been left in the dark. When you integrate both shadow and light, you don't just balance them, you transcend them. You become something beyond duality, something higher. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming your full, authentic self that's not ruled by unconscious forces pulling you in opposite directions. Light and darkness stops being a battle, and instead you become the force that holds both. Like Abraxas, you're not trapped by either. You are the totality, the wholeness, the creator of your own reality. In other words, the age-old battle between light and dark has had a missing piece, and the missing piece is unity. We are both light and shadow. And the moment that we embrace that truth, that's when we become whole. Now, we talked a lot about magic and the occult today, but what if Jesus was actually an occult magician? Watch my video, The Lost Magic of Jesus. It'll change the way you see everything. Or if you want to know more about how Abraxas is related to Abracadabra, watch my video on the occult messages in Lady Gaga's music video.